21 Fascinating Facts, a collection of fascinating facts for your anti-net Zettelkasten. Today's fascinating facts come to you from Lifting the Fog, a specific guide to inattentive ADHD in adults by Michael Carr, 2014, an Amazon.com ebook. I bought this ebook on June 28, 2020. The core symptoms of ADHD, hyperactive, or combined type are impulsivity, restlessness, and sensitivity to external environment. That's called being distracted. It's mostly found among extroverted adults who start out as loud, impulsive, and hyperactive kids. This is the profile given in the book Lifting the Fog. Lifting the Fog says, by contrast, those with inattentive ADHD rarely draw attention to themselves, and ADHD inattentive type receives little attention. I was diagnosed with ADHD inattentive type in 2016, and 10 years later I would say that I believe those two statements are true. I mean, I even forgot I had inattentive type until I found this ebook and reread it. Because even though a psychiatrist diagnosed me based on my description of my symptoms as predominantly inattentive, when I went to the other doctor for treatment with medication, he said everybody is just classified as combined type. So, what are the core symptoms of ADHD inattentive type? I would say still impulsivity, restlessness, and sensitivity to external environment, but in a way that the person internalizes. Inattentive type people seem normal as kids, but are more likely seen as shy, daydreamy, and hesitant individuals who blend into the background as adults. People with inattentive type are distracted by their own thoughts and feelings, in addition to sensitivity to their external environment. Those with inattentive ADHD may appear to stay on task, but mentally drift off into their own world. Introverts with attention problems have a much harder time focusing on tasks they find boring or difficult, and can often zone out when making a big effort to stay focused. By the way, an introvert is defined in Lifting the Fog as a relatively quiet, independent person who's often preoccupied with their own thoughts and feelings. According to a psychologist named Ari Tuckman, there are 4 aspects of attention that are important to cognitive functioning. Those are selective attention, divided attention, shifting attention, and sustained attention. Selective attention is the ability to focus on specific things while ignoring others. Divided attention is the ability to pay attention to 2 or more things at once. Shifting attention is the ability to deliberately shift attention back and forth between 2 or more sources of information, such as listening to the radio while making breakfast. And sustained attention is the ability to maintain attention while doing something boring or repetitive, such as proofreading message board posts, a job I had once. In Lifting the Fog, Carr says that selective attention is probably the main area of difficulty for those with inattentive ADHD. Selective attention, the ability to focus on specific things while ignoring others. That could also be sensitivity to external environment, too. ADHD combined type is a U.S. mental health classification used to identify those who are both hyperactive or impulsive and inattentive. Could be either or both. So if I was diagnosed with inattentive, but then classified as combined, which includes inattentive, what am I? Who am I? According to neuropsychologist Barbara Fisher, with inattentive ADHD, hyperactivity and restlessness are triggered by anxiety. High anxiety levels are very common among adults with inattentive ADHD. According to Dr. Russell Barkley, a leading ADHD researcher, 25 to 40% of people with inattentive ADHD also have high levels of anxiety. Something else of interest is that Dr. Barkley calls ADHD a disorder of executive function. Interesting words, executive function. That's a cognitive psychology thing, but both of those words have other definitions, so that's why I find them interesting. Inattentive type ADHD often have the opposite behavioral problems as those with classic or combined ADHD, such as being too passive and unassertive, being anxious and overcautious, and a tendency to avoid taking risks. And this was true for me as a child a lot and a teen. You know, I was coached by people, peers, and grown-ups and coworkers and bosses to be more assertive and, you know, not be too overcautious or too passive. And from my point of view, it wasn't being passive, it was just having a slightly slower tempo. That in the context of a work environment or a situation like that with a lot of people that you're communicating with on multiple levels, pausing is seen as being unassertive, whether that's actually what happened or not. One common issue for those with inattentive ADHD is overspecializing, focusing on what they're good at and carefully avoiding tasks they have difficulty with. Procrastination is a major issue for those with inattentive ADHD. A typical example of things that people procrastinate or put off most frequently are conducting work-related phone calls, which I find funny and true. A comorbid condition with inattentive ADHD is chronic low-level depression known as dysthymia, which can worsen inattention, motivation, and increase procrastination symptoms too. What can you do? Well, experts recommend eating more protein and complex carbohydrates, whole grain cereals, vegetables, and fruit. You'll be amazed at the difference it can make to eat certain foods or not eat certain foods at your discretion. And mindfulness, being fully focused on what you're doing at the time, can help with the symptoms of inattentive ADHD, such as emotional regulation and anxiety reduction. And what does that mean, being fully focused on what you're doing at the time? No multitasking, no TV with the cable news on in the background. Generally, for me as an ADHD inattentive individual, it means needing to have control of my environment anywhere that I'm going to be for more than 10 minutes. Either control of that environment, or it just being a hospitable environment that allows me to focus on one thing without having to divide my attention, or without having to rely too much on my selective attention ability, focusing on specific things while ignoring others, like noises and distractions in that environment. So, what advice does Michael Carr have for people with inattentive ADHD? His advice is feel the fear and do it anyway. Because people with inattentive ADHD often underestimate themselves and put off things they are fully capable of doing. So feel the fear and do it anyway.